Good morning. For the past few months, in fact, councillors of the Democratic Alliance in Tshwane and the communities that we represent have had to deal with a spate of power outages. We've tried our best to relay information to residents, to force management to make critical decisions to improve the situation, and to place pressure on the political leadership to prioritize things, especially at the start of an academic year, because we've got households that are suffering, trying to get their kids to school. We've got people on small holdings that can't pump water if there's no electricity. And just a sense that things are rapidly deteriorating, especially from the perspective of Tshwane's grid. Today, the DA is announcing a set of measures, an attempt to bring relief to Tshwane electricity consumers, but also importantly, to stop the collapse of the electricity grid, which in the past year has deteriorated to a significant extent. We are preparing a formal complaint to NERSA in terms of Section 32 of the Energy Regulation Act. It is a complaint against Tshwane for failure to fulfill its license conditions, and that complaint will be supported by the documented experiences of councillors, the interactions with officials, the information that has been put out to the public. And so we will be drawing on affidavits of households who have either had no electricity or who have had to suffer intermittent electricity disruptions. And this includes businesses with payrolls and production lines, especially in the east of the city, where so many people depend for their livelihoods on the prosperity and the well-being of those businesses. The recurring power outage in Eastland is the longest in recent memory, and I say that having experienced several substation events and power outages in the city. Power has been on and off, but mostly off, since the 26th of December. But Eastland is by no means the only community affected by these power outages. In fact, as I sit here in Brooklyn, we are fortunate to be one of the few outlets in Brooklyn, or few places in Brooklyn that it has power. In fact, these power outages started November last year. And at the time, I said that the DA would consider a NERSA complaint. It's not something we do lightly. It's very easy to criticize, and we understand that the city's electricity grid infrastructure is deteriorated, that there isn't enough money, that there's a funding issue. However, the experiences of the past few weeks have convinced us that if we want an independent assessment of the state of the electricity grid, so as to inform good budget decisions, we are going to have to apply pressure. NERSA has license conditions, the municipality has obligations. To my mind, a municipality's obligations have never been this directly challenged, but there's always a first time. We believe that with the benefit of such an independent assessment, and of course NERSA can then decide to ask for a full investigation, the city will be able to make difficult but necessary budgetary decisions. And I want to make it clear that I believe that especially in the past year, the escalating power outages has been budget driven. This has been because of budget decisions made by the municipality. In February 2025, when tabling its first adjustment budget, the ANC coalition increased expenditure on two items: water tankers and security companies. Now that had a definitive effect on the ability of the city to maintain and to respond to service outages in both water and electricity. As we approach the next budget cycle, the DA has had sight of an internal City of Tshwane communication asking departments to cut their expenditure by 5 to 10%. Now you can do the sums. It is between 1.7 and 2 billion rand of cuts that the city is asking departments to make in preparation for first the adjustment budget in February and then the tabling of the city's budget for 2026-27 in April. We fear that what this means for frontline service delivery, including electricity, is that more money is going to be taken away, and this is going to result in more power outages that last longer, with fewer resources in the hands of City of Tshwane work teams to respond to these outages and to give a reassurance to the public that our infrastructure is sound and intact. There's no doubt that this recent call by the city to cut expenditure by 5 to 10% is the direct result of the backdated pay increases which ANC Deputy Mayor Bonzo Modise promised to trade union leaders last year, without in fact checking whether the city could afford these increases. In a letter to trade union leaders dated the 6th of January 2026, the city proposes to pay an increase or settlement of 777 million rand. Incidentally, the same amount that the city spent on water tankers in the past year. Now that is an alternative to the 1.5 billion which the city is obliged to pay in terms of the promise made by Modise. Now what this letter is a clear admission that the city cannot afford the increases. And if the city cannot afford the increases, it should have taken the matter on review to the Labour Court, as the DA said over and over again during the course of last year. We'd already won in the Labour Court, but now that the city no longer has a negotiating position with unions, that there's no leverage in these discussions, it wants to reach a settlement agreement. So it is clear that for us to ensure that there's a reliable supply of water and electricity, that our infrastructure is sound, we are, as residents of Tshwane, going to have to fight. Everybody else is fighting. All of the different stakeholders are fighting for their share. And it is time that the residents stand up and fight for money to be spent on the stuff of local government, which is primarily, to begin with, water and electricity. And so the DA is also launching a citywide petition to place pressure on the municipality in the February and April budgets to ensure that water and electricity is not defunded, and to ensure that smart decisions are made to stop the deterioration of the city's infrastructure. If we don't do this, if we don't fight for these services, then the money is going to go to some other ANC-aligned stakeholder, and I can assure you that is not the ordinary people of the city of Tshwane. Ultimately, in this year, the residents of the city will have an opportunity to go to the ballot box, to decide who holds the power and who can make those decisions. 2021's election mandate is very close to expiry. And as much as we can do in opposition, and we can do a lot, especially taking hands with civil society, the power is ultimately decided by the numbers in the municipal council. And that is the most important call to action. I am joined by my colleague Themba Fosi, the DA spokesperson on utility services in the city, and I want him to share a bit of his experiences trying to assist councillors and residents in the city, also observations that he has made. And after Themba Fosi, I'm going to ask Jackie Ace, the spokesperson on finance, also to make a few comments on the financial position of the city, as well as additional information that we have of the city's refusal to investigate unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. A big red flag for the residents of the city. Themba?
Thank you very much, Brink. Whilst it's very important to underscore what Brink has mentioned so far as a budget-driven service, one thing we have noticed and come to see that there also a level of lack of preparedness so far as service delivery is concerned. I would go back, as Brink has said, in November, where we had a huge amount of storms across the city, where it affected Region 2, Region 3, Region 4. And the backlog and the pressure in those areas necessitated that the city should take a decision of understanding the impact it has, especially on Region 3, which is the heartbeat of the city. As a result, during that time, we had then convened a meeting with the divisional head just to understand on the pressure points on all those regions. We did fortunately sit down, but clearly from the city's side, the preparedness was not there. We had residents that had longer outages, councillors that are extremely under a huge amounts of pressure to be able to give proper updates to our residents who they account to. Instead of trying to then see how they can be able to move all the resources across all those regions to repurpose them to the areas where they have got pressure points, so that whilst you don't have budget, but at least you do have resources so far as human capital who can be able to assist and obviously expedite all those outages, which was not the case. So towards the December month, where we then had Olive and Old Bosch that was banned, the Kudu Sport also that had banned. Majority of the personnel during that time was away on leave. Now you have the whole executive that is not there from the MMC, the city manager is not there, the COO is not there. You don't have, even the group head was not there. I've just learned recently that the leave was cancelled. You've got leadership that is not there and expect the groundsmen to be able to get support nowhere where decisions are supposed to be taken and be able to obviously expedite the restoration of residents. Which is an issue from us. Those are not budget-driven issues. Those are decisions that need to be taken by the leadership. If you've got proper leadership, you are able to cancel leave of whoever that is your subordinate to come back and be able to assist on your network, especially the Oliven and Good Sport issue. One thing also we have noted is that when there was fires in Oliven or Bosch, you had councillors who were invited on site to be able to get a blow-by-blow experience so that they can obviously explain to their residents as to what is the problem, how far is this going to go, and maybe to a certain extent allow residents to prepare around the restoration time, which is quite important. You would expect that the same thing should also happen in Gurupur, but that was not the issue. Our councillors or councillors in certain areas were blocked from having access to the power station so that they can have a blow-by-blow experience and obviously be able to share residents. And December holidays, our kids are back from universities, our parents are back. Everyone is back from work with their families, and you could also expect that the fridges are stocked, everything has been stocked, and having to have no electricity for over 2-3 weeks. I mean that alone it is a huge slap, and this is something that we need to also say to our officials that they should just leave politics to politicians, and they should do work that is actually paid. That they actually paid for. This also happened in Swartkop, in Centurion around May, and again at Brakfontein substation, where our residents had 15 days of outages, where councillors were also blocked from having to get an understanding as to what is happening. You can't be a councillor and get an update through a social media or a media statement. You need to be on the ground so that you can be able to get an understanding and you share that with your constituency. I think I'm covered on that.
Yeah, and that experience also heightened the suspicion that, you know, if you don't want the councillors to come on site at Kudu Sport and see what's happening, are you hiding something? You're either hiding something or you are blocking the representatives of certain communities from accessing information, whereas others are privileged with information.
Yep.
Jackie?
Thanks. So yeah has mentioned that the electricity crisis that we are sitting with is budget driven. And parts of that is because of bad decisions that has been made by the current government, the salary increases, city cleansing levy, planning to collect more than what is possible. But what we are seeing that some of it is also a combination of incompetence and protecting of patronage. The city is struggling to collect in the way that it should collect. They don't affect credit control onto top leadership like Bonzo Modise and his Mzansi Resorts. Even the mayor herself had a massive account that was outstanding. And now we are seeing that is spilling over to the real threat of where the city is not dealing properly with UIFW, unauthorized and wasteful expenditure, which one can only assume that is also in an attempt to protect patronage. And National Treasury is taking a very hard stance on this and have written to the city in December that it will invoke section 216(2) of the Constitution to withhold equitable share and to withhold grants because of the city's incapacity to deal with UIFW and the incapacity to ensure consequence management as per the MFMA. Now, this is a real threat to the city. The majority of our capital budget is grant funding. We are very much reliant on our equitable share for the cash flow of the city. And the DA has been warning of this inability to deal with UIFW since September last year. Our spokesperson on the MPAC committee has put out 4 different press statements and have at 4 different occasions called onto the MPAC chairperson to properly deal with reports, to bring quality reports that is not sent back, and to ensure that reports recommendations include both recovery of funds as well as consequence management.
Yes, sorry, Jackie, I just want to make this simple.
Yes.
To make this simple, it means the city isn't investigating the misspending of money.
100%.
So if budgets are exceeded, if money is spent on things that are illegal, the committee charged with investigating that, which is called the Municipal Public Accounts Committee, is not investigating it. Mm-hmm. They're having all sorts of visits and things, but they're not having meetings and considering the investigative reports. And so you get an accumulation of the... So I just wanted to, in ordinary terms.
So the risk now is that National Treasury is saying either deal with it or we no longer pay over the grants from National Treasury to the city, grants that the city is very much reliant on, and grants that will again make sure or result in water and electricity not receiving the funds that it should receive. So the call is on the MPAC committee, on the mayor, and on her chairpersons to ensure that proper investigations is done, proper reports come to the MPAC committee, and that they can come to council to be dealt with, that we can comply with ensuring that we spend our funds proper, but also that we comply with National Treasury's requirements. Thanks, William.
Great. Any questions? Kutle will facilitate questions.
Mr. Brink, 1.4 million for replenishing a cable, 1 kilometer cable in Eastern last week. A private contractor. Well, is that list of private contractors compiled?
Good morning, Antoinette Slavert. I'm a freelance journalist reporting for Moneyweb and Marula Media. I just want to ask your opinion on these frequent fires at substations. Why these fires? Is it something that can be prevented, or what do you suspect is the underlying reason for that?
Thank you. Celia, we also got a couple of questions via the live stream from journalists. One of them is, how can the majority of top leadership be on leave at the same time? That sounds like an oversight. And then as well as why is the city relying on private security companies? Does this reflect capacity issues in the police force? Cable theft during power outages extend outages. Okay. And I think those are, the critical questions. Thanks.
Okay, my colleagues are free to jump in if I've missed anything or if I've got anything wrong. The first question on private contractors. The big frustration in East Lynn, and this is something we discovered looking back, was that the cable faults on that line were so numerous that a call should have been made earlier to replace the cable instead of patching something that was in such an advanced state of, I can't even find the proper word. That cable was shot. And this became evident as, you'd repair one cable fault and then discover another cable fault. And what was not justifiable, defensible, was the time it took for the municipality to make that call. And it tells me that management coordination wasn't there. There wasn't somebody to say, okay, guys, what you're telling me indicates clearly this line is shot. We are going to have to dip into the budget and replace the cable. The use of private contractors, it was a management call. I can't say that was either good or bad. It was probably a matter of necessity by the time that they took it. And how these contractors are usually appointed is on panels. You'd have a panel of service providers. So I wouldn't, find any fault with necessarily on the face of it with the use of private contractors. It is often used, but the point is a lot of labor and a lot of overtime and a lot of frustration could have been saved had a management call been made to say, this line has suffered so much cable theft, it's so compromised, it's so old. Compare it to the amount of hours we need to work trying to patch it. And if that had been done, I believe the electricity situation in Eastern could have been resolved far sooner. The substation fires is a very serious issue. And of course, it's not something that has recently happened. It's been happening for a while. No substation is designed to burn down. It is designed to shut down once certain things happen. Once it becomes too hot in there, the thing shuts down. Your first line of defense, as I understand it as a non-engineer, and I've interrogated this thing as much as I can, is the protection equipment is the first line of defense. So every substation has protection equipment, and the fear is that protection equipment in so many instances has been neglected, has become decayed, is no longer in place. And that is why we need an independent assessment of the substations. Last year, I put this theory that I had developed over many years, including my own time as mayor, to the city to say, is there protection equipment in place at these substations? And the answer, which was quite comprehensive, and I think the result of a lot of probing and so forth, was it's not just the immediate protection equipment. It is old lines, it's old equipment, it's things that need to be gradually upgraded. It's the result of years of neglect. And so when there's then an incident, there's a high voltage incident. So for instance, if they hack through a cable, they steal cable, that causes an electricity surge. And if your reticulation network is not in a proper condition, you don't have the protection required, even if the immediate protection equipment at the substation is in theory, in place. So they put the price tag of this at 5 billion to stabilize the electricity network. Now, as somebody in a decision-making position, I have seen these big figures always, and they never scare me because any 5 billion can be broken up into different parts. So our priority in preparing for government is to take that report and hopefully an independent investigation and to say, what can Tshwane afford to upgrade in any given financial year? Maybe we can afford 750 million rand of upgrades to the most vulnerable parts of the distribution network this year, or 500 million. But then at least you've got a plan, and it then links up with your master plan so that you know where you're going. But if you're just blind to all of this and you keep on making expenditure decisions that have got nothing related to service delivery, of course the situation is going to deteriorate very badly. Let me just mention this as well. Another theory of the case that we had was that there might be an incentive for certain service providers to be called in to rebuild power stations over and over again. And this happened with Mooikloof. It happened with Wapadrand, although for different reasons. But, you know, the absence of an assurance that the job was done properly, and that is something that has to be considered very seriously by the city. Then the questions online, I think Fosi expressed some frustration with a lot of management being on leave. This is something that you have to manage with the benefit of experience. You know that Decembers are very difficult periods of time, and so any management makes the decision to say, okay, we'll let certain people go on leave maybe in February or in March, but to have everybody go on leave in December just creates a shortage, a skeleton staff. It places a whole lot of pressure on the system. As for the use of security, our concern is not so much with the use of private security, because certain services do need to be outsourced. Our concern is the type of private security that is used. The days when you could leave somebody with a baton to look after a substation are gone. Those folks get overwhelmed. If there isn't armed response, if there isn't technology, if you can't deploy a backup team to assist because you know that there's trouble, then spending on so-called watchman services becomes a complete waste of money. Now, the typical example of a company that you don't want is the one that belongs to the ANC deputy mayor, because all they have is tattered uniforms, people who don't get paid on time, constant complaints, and batons. They don't even have guns. There's no armed response. There's no use of technology. There's no use of control rooms. And what we plan to do, and we started to do when we were in office, was to do an assessment. How many critical sites do we have? Where do we have watchman services? Where do we have stationary guards? How can we reduce the reliance on these expensive watchman services by the use of technology? This is not rocket science. The private sector already does this with motion detectors and control rooms and mobile units. And we believe that that can be done in government as well. But again, if your deputy mayor has got an interest in old-style, expensive watchman services contracts, he's got to deal with the city. What kind of incentive would his government have to actually try and get better value for money when it comes to security services? I think those are the questions. Anything?
Yeah, during our tenure, just to tap on what Brink is saying, during our tenure, what we had done on, especially on cables that are volatile, we had then made sure that we have a proper allocation of budget that deals with abnormals, because I can tell you 40% of the biggest problems are cables that are joined from one end to the other. We had then made a budget available so that all the abnormals that in those areas, especially volatile areas where you know that as soon as...
And sorry, I have to... Abnormal basically is if you know that something is wrong on your line.
Yes, yes.
And to manage an abnormal is you've got a shed, you know that this cable has got 7 patches. So before the power goes off, you go and you
add a new cable.
And you add a new cable or you reinforce the patch. Yeah. So 100%. Those apologies for breaking your stride.
That is, and it cuts about 40% of all the outages, because if you look at it in the totality of things, majority of these outages are caused by either cable theft or faults that are on those lines. So once you lay those newer cables and make sure that you cut down on the trees that are also tapping onto our overhead lines. Those are simple wins that you can be able to. And I don't think that is, it requires millions and millions of money. It just needs staff that is really prepared to work on it. Far more that you need a mayor who has to also that particular understanding instead of closing down brothels. Those are things that you actually need to prioritize.
Or you can do both.
Or you can actually do both. And also on the protection of infrastructure, my punchline, Brink, is that whilst we know that we don't have adequate amount to be able to source private security, during our tenure, we had a forum where we were inviting all private securities in all areas where we've got volatility so far as cable theft is concerned. Where you know that ADT is big in Centurion or in a part of this, or you know MonitorNet is big there, you then ask them to extend their scope whilst they are safeguarding the neighborhood. Can't then they be able to at least go a little bit further by monitoring the movements around the substation or in municipal infrastructure? It worked wonders. Currently, those private security have been casted out, and security guards we've got only have a baton to guard a million rand infrastructure are being sourced out there. That is why in most instances, theft even occurs when the very same securities are there on site, which is a problem. If you had security that's got proper switchboard, proper thermal imaging cameras and all of those things, it's not expensive. I mean, an average household pays about 400 to 600 rands of ADT, MonitorNet, or whichever armed response in your own house. The very same thing could be able to be done on our substations so far as the protection of our infrastructure. It is just a political will of wanting it to work.
Mr. Brink, if NASHA accept the validity of your complaint, what are the next steps? What are the consequences and the timelines?
So NERSA, as I understand it, NERSA can make a decision that the complaint has merit, in which case they can ask for an investigation, or they can themselves commission an investigation. Again, it's not clear how often this power has in fact been used, but there's a whole set of regulations dealing with how such a complaint and investigation is then dealt with. I believe there's a tribunal which then considers the matter. But the point is that we need something external to the city at present to get them to acknowledge that there's a problem. Otherwise, we're just going to be shoveled with, let's call it, misinformation. And we believe that this is an important. So, crisp answer to your question, they can commission an investigation, and based on that investigation, it is then referred to a tribunal of some sort. That is how I understand my reading of the Act.
On paper, it is the right thing to do, I suppose, to refer to NERSA, but the regulator is extremely weak and inefficient. If they don't act on your complaint, will the DA be prepared to take it further, maybe to get a court order to compel them to act?
Yeah, Antoinette, like anything, you try what is most immediately available to you, and if it doesn't work, you take the next step. And I also think that a court of law would want to know that you have exhausted those avenues before you bring an application. Also, because many of these provisions are untested, I can't immediately, I mean, you're an expert on electricity. I can't, off the top of my head, think of an example where a municipality has been compelled to do something because it's been in breach of its license conditions. But there's always a first time. We have this in our law. It shouldn't be a dead letter law. And if it doesn't work, we'll take the next step. But more importantly, we also understand that we might be in government in a few months' time. And an important part of our manifesto is going to be to commission an independent investigation into the network. Why do I say independent? Like anything, the management and the senior staff in the municipality have been working on this network for years and years and years. There might be an incentive not to tell us exactly what has been done. We understand people work under pressure. There's a spoeg and plak type of approach to fixing the network, but we need an independent view of it. And only that will inform good budget decisions. But we're not going to wait until we're in power. We're starting now with this pressure point. Great. I think that covers the formal part of this. Thank you very much for your attendance.